Mind over matter, overcompensating, overstatements, crookedness relating, the soul's churn in return, mental overstimulation, one word, riveting, it tethers my pilot, streams that are promised to make seeking less for today. And if you're not aware or you don't know, I am the host of Poetry Journal Podcasts, and I'm here with my friend, Philosopher's Poet. And we just like to come on, and this is a night we've been doing, and we always have good conversations. So, I appreciate his feedback on, where I take my topics. And so more times than not, with these nights, I'm trying to do 3 times a week. We're trying to do 3 times a week. We're just breaking down topics, and he can follow me where I go with my thoughts. So, and I welcome people to chime in with some of the conversations we're having. And on my channel, normally, I always have quotes, and this is for something I usually put the discussions that we have update on my channel as well, and he's welcome to share some of the work, of course, on his channel. But I normally like to put a quote out there. So this is the quote for today. Vibration like oscillate but once or twice. Though in the process of my surmise, I can't do anything but atomize. Explosive like in the moments of catalysis, in need of anabolism to grow from the grotesque that has become him. The mad moments have proceeded to feed me protein, probing on and off like intermission. Now with this one, I didn't really want to put too much because it's quite compact, this little piece that I've shared. So there's a lot there. And that would make sense when I pretty much pitched this question to you. But before I do that, I don't know, did you want to speak on something?
Yeah, I wanted to say just quickly before we start, I think it's very poignant that you kind of synergize the biological and the physical with the metaphysical.
Yeah, somewhat of a mad scientist type of thing, But I am the mad poet these days, so
it's good to be mad.
Yeah, I've made a little bit of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley type of thing in there. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of, just screwed and brewed and screwed somewhat.
I was just thinking because I kind of would like the idea of everyone to embrace the idea that we're all kind of Frankensteins in some sense. There's not a negative connotation.
Well, whether it is or not, it's a statement, isn't it? So
it's a fact, even you could say.
That's your opinion. I think that's why you're here. I want you to just speak. If it's your opinion, just throw it out there, man. People feel the way people feel is where they feel.
Whether you like it or not, you're an amalgamation of various parts and things. Whatever level you look at it, on various levels, and it's for us to unpack those parts and pieces that come together to form something whole. And you can either work your way towards what you consider in your own interpretation of purity, or you can sit back and you can understand that this sort of Frankenstein, this putting together of bits and pieces, is actually the thing that makes you who you are. gives you your strengths, and you can interchange those bits and pieces however you want to make them fit in order to fit a better you.
Be the best you can be. I like that. I really like that breakdown, and it fits with where I'm taking this as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So let me just share some research before I ask the question. So, I mean, I might not have to say much. So this is more current affair. This information I'm about to share. So I probably don't have to go too much into it. I suppose I could just say one word. Diddy.
Oh God.
Okay, so just to just to reel off just off the top, just to scrape the crust a little bit, because I think that speaks for itself. Certain triggering words. I'm not really going to say certain things. I'm just thinking about the algorithm. But yes, abuse, beating people, relationship abuse, etc. So, and people coming forward prior to her partner coming out and speaking on things, and putting forward the same type of situations, assault as well, and revenge porn and whatever, just to be okay. So stay with me. And then I was looking at something else, right? Now this is more of a general, or just something I thought was relevant to the conversation. And as it says, just a little research point. It says, I was researching serial killers, right? And it says many serial killers are survivors. This is on Google. Many serial killers are survivors. I was trying to find the common traits, right, in terms of upbringing. It says many serial killers are survivors of early childhood trauma of some kind, physical or sexual abuse, family dysfunction, emotionally distant or absent parents, trauma and single recurring feeling, biography of most of that type of people. Consequence of trauma, they suppress their emotional response, etc. And I'll just add one more thing to that. And it says historically, the United States has the most recorded serial killers. There are more than 2,000 active serial doers in the United States today. Statistically speaking, 4% of all killing go unsolved. Less than 1% of all murders or serial killers. So I just wanted to start by just sharing that to begin with. Now the question I really want to just ask you is this: are monsters born or made?
So off the bat, and I'll get into further explanation, my long and short answer is monsters, in my opinion, monsters are made.
Interesting. Tell me more.
I believe monsters are made because there's so much potential for trauma when we are children.
Yeah.
The way how we're brought up, emotional wounds, abuse, even in our environment with the people around us at school, the education system. It's hard to account for that as an externality. And then on top of it, when you think about things that are passed on from parents or generations, whether you consider that like predispositions to certain conditions,
Yeah.
or whether they're physical or mental. You know, so one might argue that the problem was already there. However, I believe that even with the things we carry over from our parents, because I am of the opinion that a lot of that is tied up in energy and DNA, that those things can be managed through meeting emotional needs of children and fostering the right environment. I think anything can be managed, which is why I wanted to explain further, because you might say that, well, if that's the case, if some people have certain conditions, or let's say things, let's say inherited from parents or our forefathers, certain trauma, then maybe the conditions were already there for them to become so-called monsters. But I believe that we're all subject to change, and that monsters and trauma are created from a lack of love and a fear of love. And so I think the remedy to that is, when we're growing up, is to be in those ideal conditions to manage and overcome such things. Because it's a bit reductive to say that we were all born monsters, because that applies to you and me as well, that we had the potential to, as adults, become monsters through our own journeys, but we haven't. The conditions might have been there. There might have been things that our parents had to deal with or passed over. And there are also issues, well, I can't speak for yourself, but I can speak for many other people, and including myself, that some of the conditions in which we grow up with are less than ideal for emotional bonds, and create, codependent relationships, fear, all these other things. And yet, why is it some people are able to subvert this idea, become a monster, and try and get to grips with themselves, and some people aren't?
Yes, indeed. I was just thinking, what inspired this was the first thing that came to my head was thinking about the situation with Diddy, and how that may have come across, and how that may have started. And it is what it is now, but I was trying to think to myself, man, where would they start if I was to say, man, where was the birth of all this craziness, or all this tainted, that grew to be something so malignant and cancerous? Where would I start in terms of speaking, pertaining to a chronological relation to him, and perhaps upbringing? So many different things. You also mentioned history, somewhat. That might play a part, but it's still somewhat environmental, because it's pretty much experience. I'll bring that up later on. But I was just thinking to myself, man, this guy has everything in the world that he could want. Perhaps in terms of like richness, wealth, so many different things, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And yet he still, perhaps, there was a time where this thing was a relishing thing, where he couldn't actually control or force it to remain dormant. But it got to this point where now it seems to me like it's thriving. Do you get what I mean? Where he actually embraced it, and he actually cultivated and let it just, grew flames. And I just, so at this point, it seems to me, could it be a choice? Or simply Was it simply the fire, that the house fire, that the wooden flames fire in winter keeping you warm that got out of control and now it's burning the house down?
Mm. So it's interesting because I know nothing really about how the guy grew up, only what the media says, and that in itself doesn't provide you any real substance.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But I guess, I guess I didn't want to dig too deep because it really and truly it's just an example. It's just a muse. I don't necessarily want to know too much, but because I know there's a lot of people in this world that we can use as an example when it comes to this situation, and we talking monsters, whether that's that towards that type of monster or just like killers in general. Do you get what I mean? Like shooting, whatever you want.
Well, the first thing is I'd say that there's a lot of ego involved. But ego is usually excessive ego which an ego itself isn't a bad thing. Excessive ego is usually there to cover up an insecurity, a point to prove to oneself or to another environment about one's self-worth. Now, we all have weaknesses. We all have, how should I say, character flaws, I'm going to say. However, can you imagine if we don't resolve those character flaws? In fact, if we end up becoming rich, powerful, and famous, and we still have those flaws, can you imagine how much more having that power, influence, and money will actually exasperate those existing flaws? Because now you have an existing outlet and a license for it to embrace it, simply because you suddenly have this veneer of invulnerability.
Yeah.
And that is the first thing I'd say. When the root of something breaks on the ground, if it becomes a mighty tree, but that mighty tree is rotten on the inside, then it's going to rot everything else. As a saying, simply because that just enhances and gives credence and feeds that ego, that which is inside you. It almost makes it feel like perhaps I'm justified even in my actions, but that still doesn't get to the heart of why you would have this in the first place. That's just the amplifier of existing issues, the root causes, whatever was there that caused someone to believe that they had some sort of insufficiency or gap there to fill. And materially, someone can have everything. We can all do, but just anyone. And yet the man clearly was troubled. So those material things couldn't fulfill, in the end, those inner needs that he had, the emotional wounds, the spiritual wounds. They were just a placeholder.
One second there, because as much as much as we're talking about richness, the only facet that we can really confirm necessarily is financial richness. Do you get what I mean? But it doesn't necessarily mean there was not more different facets, as you know, there's different facets that was actually still present there. However, of course, the fact that he is who he is, there was a lot of things lacking, evidently, to pertaining to richness and self-fulfillment, etc., to the point where you turn to this or turn to such a direction as so destructive. But at the same time, it begs the question on so many different fronts. You also mentioned history, but before I go there, I think there was a point I wanted to ask about. I think, with anything that you want to be in life, or that you are, or you choose to embrace, I think it starts with a choice. You have to choose to be something that you're not, or something that you choose to embrace something. But before that, I think there's a certain discipline. Again, we're kind of veering towards that whole thing of culture again. But I don't necessarily want to go too far into that. But I'll just stick with the point of having a choice. You know, but then it breeds the exposure to a certain environment, and perhaps that's another facet we could kind of look at in terms of perhaps his environment. Somewhat.
Well, that's an excellent point. You hit me on the head. I was actually starting to think about that in the sense of if anyone has those kind of insecurities and they're offered a ransom, a price to pay to participate in something, but unfortunately that culture or group of people who guarantee you success are also of a certain vibration, and they know they can see that already lingering within you, and actually it's easy to be sucked up into a culture that embraces and tells you that, and gives you credence, a license for that which you're trying to come to terms with, So you're right. I think culture and the environment, I'm thinking, may play a big part in terms of the kind of culture or environment you attract. The culture, especially, that becomes a normality to something. So you may, you go with the flow. You may not even know yourself. You just might know what motivates you, and your desire for something that has a perceived worth or value as a human being, someone in society, suddenly becomes more important than understanding who you are and coming to terms with the things going on inside of you. But certainly you can say a lot about the culture. I might leave that to you to describe, but I think I know where you're going with culture and the people associated with that culture and where they are at in terms of their own level of consciousness.
Yes, absolutely. And I keep going back to culture, and I think sometimes, it brings me back to this saying, they have where somebody tell a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. And I suppose that could be a microcosm of a certain culture where, you see it often enough, it becomes somewhat
normalized.
Condoned. It becomes something that is normal or natural. You get what I mean? Yeah. And perhaps obviously we was about that life to an extent. So perhaps it was a situation where he was exposed to certain things, or he saw certain things at certain points, where pivotal points in terms of vulnerability, where he didn't necessarily had the ability to perhaps understand, or any person, being of that type of person to really understand their situation and see it as what it is, as like, that's wrong. Do you get what I mean? They buy into some, they get attached to something that is somewhat wrong, that doesn't make sense, that is somewhat borderline. We were talking about Frankenstein earlier on, the monster, and it's funny. Let's go back to that, because I think it's somewhat intertwined. You think about the creator, which was Frankenstein. That was the doctor, right? That was his name, Frankenstein.
Well,
I'm just trying to be correct. Frankenstein was a monster, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was a monster.
I can't remember the doctor's name, but from what I recall, Frankenstein was a monster. Now, just throughout the story, if you think about the traits of a human being, especially speaking towards the positive traits of human beings, the pendulum swings both ways. I would say it seems to me that Frankenstein exhibit more positively humane traits compared to the Doctor, was his creator.
Yeah,
Frankenstein.
In my memory of the movie, because I never read the book, was that Frankenstein eventually developed compassion,
yes,
and kindness, while his creator, if I remember my recollection, it was the movie, obviously, so it might not be accurate, didn't exhibit those traits. His creation, based on his creator, were born out of some of the more negative aspects of humanity. There was an element of fear and power, and an element of ego as well. The fact that his creator saw himself to be like a god.
Yeah. But take a closer look at this, because when I think about it, right, and man, this goes so deep, but just on the superficial, from a superficial lens, and somewhat deep. If you think about the experience, the life experience pertaining to just that time period, pertaining to whether you're talking about a book or the movie when Frankenstein was created, relating to the Doctor as well as Frankenstein, I somewhat think they exhibited, or even the Doctor's life as a whole, and Frankenstein being Frankenstein as a whole time period, I think they exhibited pretty much the same summary. Like but somewhat more nuanced when you think about the Doctor, because obviously, but in a way, maybe not. I tell you, I explain to you where I'm at with it. So you have the Doctor, right? And of course, whatever he did wrong as a child, etc., you don't know any better. Now, when you think about Frankenstein, at the time he was created, he didn't know any better either. He just, I just came into this world 5 minutes ago. So the fact that I'm killing somebody, I'm doing damage or whatnot, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a grown baby. Do you get what I mean? I was born.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? But as he developed and his cognitive start to really show him, he start to develop and understand that life, and perhaps you could say morals. He actually did better. He actually turned things around. He actually did better with his life.
Yes.
Frankenstein, that is.
Yeah.
Now you compare that to the Doctor. Yes, that was the same thing for him at the beginning, but he somewhat grew into something of a monster. Now along the way, we're talking about the environment, the culture, that somewhat relative environment and culture that he kind of grew into, and somewhere along the way, becoming a scientist and knowing even more, he became the mad scientist, didn't he? And he started to play God somewhat, and obviously that's somewhat egotistical to add to it, extremely, where it's unhealthy. Do you get what I mean? And it actually shows, it actually implies as well the choice behind his action, because at this point, yes, you have the power to turn to the dark side of things and the knowledge to do it, but you also have the and this is what I mean by it's somewhat skewed, because he's thinking he's doing good, right? But in the end, you actually did something so inhumane. So so dark, so twisted, and in creating somebody like Frankenstein. Do you get what I mean? Where it's
Yeah.
pretty much against nature to do what he did, but at the same time, he's thinking of doing something so magnanimous, so special.
Yeah.
I mean,
But the interesting thing is,
at this last part. So what I just explained there is pretty much what I'm saying in terms of like, you know, you create a culture or you get exposed to this environment where you start to believe a lie as being the truth, or you start to believe an environment that's showing you something that's inhumane or destructive as being something, and being something that is natural and condoned in society or condoned in your own head. You get what I'm saying?
yeah. So it's interesting you mention obviously the creation of Frankenstein being against nature, because obviously it's interesting because obviously Frankenstein ended up being more human than the Doctor, so they switched places.
There you go.
Doctor became the so-called the Frankenstein, and Frankenstein became the human.
Yes.
Yeah. It raises the question of it as well about the idea of if human beings are creators and we've been given that gift by our creator, do we wield the right are we mature enough to wield that responsibly, ethically, morally, in a mature manner? And I'm not so sure that
That's what I'm saying. And now it brings into question, you know, if anybody was to ask, man, what is the purpose of ethics? What is the purpose of wrong or right? And whether you believe in it, whether it works for you or whether it don't, that's not the question. It's I suppose what I suppose what I'm looking at is religion. And of course, I think that's somewhat of the Doctor in itself, in terms of like the effects, because of course, you know, religion is a thing that people has done so much great things for people, but it's also created some monsters at the same time.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, I agree that despite all its positive influences on society, it's got some negative influences on society, which is why I've always gone by the doctrine, and I won't dwell on this too long to get away from the conversation. I've always dwelled on the fact, with respect to religion, my own past experience, that people shouldn't be scared to come into a religion and then leave a religion once it no longer serves their purpose. If the intention of them seeking knowledge is righteous, or it is about self-fulfillment. But religion is all about being stuck in a place. Once you're in there, it's sort of like this is your salvation. Whereas I'm more like, no, one man can be something one day and another thing another day, or you can read a religious book. You can look at all the things that are wise in there and look at all the things that aren't, and you can take away what you want from there. That's just yeah.
No, I understand, but as much as I'm not religious, though, I don't really want to too dwell on that, because I know I respect people and their religion.
Yeah.
But yes, it doesn't. I'm not religious, but I respect people that are, and I think it has a place. I respect it. But yes, as I said, it has created some monsters that can't be argued. And when you think about the amount of wars that's happened, born out of religion, it's undeniable. Some of the experiences that's been showcased worldwide when it comes to them things that we talk about. But here's another thing I wanted to ask you. We speak about so many. We've kind of covered so many different things. I also wanted to ask you about epigenetics because you mentioned history.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with it.
History, genetics. What specifically is this? Quite interesting.
Yes. So what I'm thinking about is not necessarily, I think somewhat indirectly, people are somewhat made a victim of their circumstance. Where if you kind of include epigenetics in a certain situation, it's almost like you have a phobia that you don't understand, or you have a history of something you're you're just not taking to it, or like you have an affinity for it, and you not knowing that that's because let me just break down epigenetics. Basically what is in just for the people that are listening, in biology, epigenetics is the study of heritable traits or a stable change of cell function that happen without changes to the DNA. The Greek prefix implies that there are no top. I was trying to find out a bit more to kind of speak on the function of where I was trying to take this. But in essence, I suppose what I'm trying to speak to, which is where epigenetics comes in, is basically through epigenetics, is said that you can pass on trauma. That's through epigenetics. So I suppose what I'm trying to get at is the trauma of your past ancestors are somewhat, that's passed on, and so people relive situations that they have no idea that even happened.
Yes.
Or anxiety about certain factors, certain environmental factors that just come at you and hit you, and you have no idea why or how to handle it. Why you have certain affinity to certain things, and what's that? What's that about? Why is this situation? So I think this is where I'm trying to get at.
So this is interesting because when you say we have certain responses or reactions or triggers and we don't understand why, it's similar to what someone like a Carl Jung would have referred to as that which is in the subconscious. For example, that we don't we're not aware of or consciously aware of. It's unknown to us, but there are certain emotional, physical triggers. Now, that could be anything from something that comes directly from your mum or your dad or your grandparents, or that could be ancestral history. I'm going to say it could be, a lot of people obviously talk about slavery,
I mean, that's without a doubt, though, man. Yeah. It's not really it just is what it is. Yeah, of course, slavery definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of speaks to what I'm talking about, and just a little point in there. Of course, people still suffer from the trauma of slavery. Anyway, do you get what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Fair enough. There's a lot of people that are able, perhaps for the most part, it could be argued in terms of numbers, to actually live and get over their situation and be better. But you can't. That's not everybody.
No, in fact, I would say there's probably a good reason to show that healing is definitely been delayed or slowed down. One is we can talk about trauma from slavery and it being hereditary, but obviously if you don't have the economic means to actually get out of a situation, then in the first place that's going to be delayed or hold because of certain needs of a society or to survive or live. That in itself is
Hold
a
that thought. Hold that thought. Because with the conversation we're having now, I want you to be a little bit careful with that thought, because there is fine lines here. Do you get what I mean? And just speaking objectively in terms of consistency, because we're saying basically that you know better, you do better. For the majority. Well, so even in this situation, of course, now don't get me wrong, I'm somewhat playing devil's advocate, but even in this situation, it begs the question, because even in this situation, going back to the main breakdown of, I'll just say Diddy, and the situation being what it is, we already spoke about seeing wrong and being convinced that it's actually good, or it's condoned, it's all right. And now you might have trauma and you're somewhat uplifting or condoning trauma, as opposed to figuring out your situation and being better for it, or better.
Well, let me elaborate on what I was trying to say, and I need to communicate this better. When I started talking about, when I said economics, what I was trying to get was actually, even if you take into account the trauma of, let's say, slavery, I was saying that delayed or slowed down progression with regards to healing from trauma or processing it is evident simply because in some societies with our relatives across let's say in America, well, especially our people in America, you went from slavery to, Jim Crow, discrimination. When I said economics, I was talking about the idea of having to actually survive within a society with an element of fear and not have the time to process trauma. So you're still, even though you're not on a plantation, you still live, and there's feminine racism. There's still a challenge to your survival, to you actually living socially, economically. I think that's what I meant in terms of there are certain things that delayed our ability, maybe as people, to deal with trauma. Survival mode, whether it's a plantation or you're getting fire hosed down for protesting, or there's segregation or apartheid, or even for example, if you look at somewhere like a Haiti, where you're free, but there's no infrastructure, there's no non-existent economy, you're just a group of people who have just come out of this system, but what do you do next?
Yes, and obviously I understand what you're saying about that, and obviously you could argue that's by design anyway. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't by accident that they don't have enough food. So yes, no, I get what you're saying. It does feed into something for sure. But I just wanted to kind of veer into that because I thought it fits well with what we're talking about. And when we speak to epigenetics, that's next to that. That's next to what you experience pertaining to slavery. But I think in general, if you're talking about, we've all, speaking about people that experienced it, there's the Caribbean, there's the US. I think those are the main, but everybody that did, it was such a period that was long enough that, of course, your people that are living, despite that, they are gonna have some kind of trauma relating back to the whole situation. But I think what it is, the muse for this conversation is Frankenstein, and I guess that's what I'm using to almost pretty much, veer into different ways, different and veer into different topics or subheadings, different segments speaking about different things. And so, as you remember, I mentioned serial killers at the beginning, and that's something else in itself. So what could be the as we know, Frankenstein is the monster, and the doctor created Frankenstein. So what would be the doctor pertaining to a serial killer, and what would the tools be, to turn into a serial killer, and what, how they're developed to almost, being realized.
So, I mean, you know the saying, hurt people, right?
Yeah, man.
I think my opinion is that the same stands for that. You could just use serial killers in this example. Any sort of trauma, but we started with that. I think that's a prime example of that, because are most of the people associated with that group, are they just passing on trauma to someone else? I remember reading something somewhere that says there are a certain proportion of people who experience certain types of abuse, who experience that abuse themselves when they were younger, but they're now doling out that same sort of abuse, without going into detail, to others.
I mean that's a very generic word. That's a very crust, superficial way of looking at it, because I think we can all assume that's a factor. Do you get what I mean? So I don't necessarily want to go too much into that part of it, because I do agree. It's not much there, but I think I want to kind of maybe go a bit deeper into it. If you want to go, put your kufi hat on and just go theory. Just throw a theory at me.
Okay. All right. Let's go with the theory. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, do you have a theory then?
No, but I was I'll go into it.
Okay.
Go there.
So
I guess what I'm asking you is just, it's more, what were the tools of, because you want me to go first?
Yeah, go on.
All right. So in my mind, I would say it's somewhat reliable to say that environment is pretty much the doctor when it comes to
Oh, so this is where, okay, so no, I wasn't completely clear on where you're going with this, but now that you've said that, actually, that I know what you're saying, and I have to agree to a large extent that environment is. So, okay, I'll let you carry on. Sorry, yeah.
No, let me I'll just wrap it up. So, for me, the environment is the doctor.
Okay.
And the tools at play, or of course, the trauma, the destructive dysfunction, destructive childhood, so many different things that we know go at play in a disadvantaged household, or even if it's just a situation where you have a single parent. We've heard about the people that grew up killing cats and poisoning dogs, and all these different type of things, or the neighbor that one day the dog just disappears, just nowhere to be found anymore. All these different type of things that would happen, and no explanation to how it came about. I think these are what I'm kind of just alluding to, and then I think somewhat along the way you have people that would, you know, like we said, you're perhaps you're a child at this point,
Mm.
and but somewhere along the line, or should I say, somewhere along the way, of your experiences and what you're doing, the wrongdoings, the line was blurred,
Yeah,
and so now you can't tell the difference between wrong or right. Your ethics are somewhat skewed.
mm.
Your lens is distorted. You don't know what's going on. So
Yeah,
now it led you to a place. It led you to a place now where you pretty much have the ability to believe what you want to believe.
yeah,
Because who am I to stop me from doing what I want to do?
yeah,
Because at this point, it's kind of like the animal or the lion that's tasted blood. Why do I want to go back to the norm?
mm.
And when I mean tasted blood, I mean tasted human blood. Why would I want to go back to the norm?
Yeah,
And there's plenty to go around.
yeah.
You
But
know what I mean?
yeah. So I would say maybe there's one key factor here in terms of having the environment or the doctor, and then having the person who's, let's say, symbolically smelled blood, tasted whatever it is they've tasted. The key thing here is, even though this so-called, because you mentioned their perception of, let's say, ethics may be skewed in terms of what's right and wrong, and them thinking that this is normal. So their guidance system, let's say, is gone. The thing that maybe points out or makes them consider whether something is quote unquote right or not. So within that, the one defining factor, in my opinion, between that which tells someone who's tasted blood, that's a good analogy, versus someone that's tasted food, is, in my opinion, is addiction.
Addiction. Okay.
But I use it in this context of the fact that even if one were to acknowledge what they're doing deep down, they'll come to the realization that what they're doing isn't right, even if that's just intellectually by comparison. They still have to have the means or the agency to say, what do I do about it? And so then creeps in the feeling of powerlessness, despite having the image and perception of power and money and all these other things.
That's interesting. Did you want to go more into it, or that where you finished?
I can go a bit more into this. It's almost like saying, on the one hand, you might have someone saying, I've gone too far down this road, or I say addiction, but we can look at it another way and say there's a price to pay for everything, and by the time you get down that road and you've looked at all the riches you've amassed on your way up, you suddenly realize that in order to change, you've actually got to sacrifice all of these things that you've gained. And suddenly the very thing that you used to measure your value as a human being will be gone, and you would consider yourself powerless, even though you would have become more powerful than you'd ever been if you'd made the sacrifice.
And just to clarify, when you say addiction, I'm assuming you're speaking of specifically drugs.
I can be, but I'm talking about anything that can become an addiction. So when we talk about tasting blood, whatever that means.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it appeals to a lower or other part of ourselves. Like the idea of stimulating, let's say, certain parts of our brain or being, or even feeding a certain sexual desire, depending what the addiction is. The ego, that which makes us gives us a perception of importance according to an external audience.
Yeah.
Those things can be addictive as well as, drugs or the usual.
Absolutely. I'll tap in here. The reason why I asked that is because I know, as much as I know, pertaining to addiction, drugs is, of course, I'd say maybe top three, one of the strongest out there. Not trying to go too deep into specifics of it, but you could argue drugs is one of the most strongest thing pertaining to addictive level of.
I mean, I agree with you.
But what I'm saying is but away from that, I've understood now that the only thing stronger than that type of addiction is sexual addiction.
Well, yeah, and actually, funny enough, any addiction pertaining to sex and anything to do with even gambling and to a certain extent drugs, depending on the drug, before you even get to the point of being dependent on a particular substance, I think our biology gets changed in a way to become dependent or addictive on the substance that are created or the actual biological response. So, people talk about things like dopamine receptors, and behind every addiction, including those that aren't necessarily drug related, we talked about sex, we talked about gambling. That's the root thing biologically. The risk and reward system.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. But what I'm saying is, and you're right. I agree with what you're saying. But like I said, sexual addiction, and we could even go deeper with this. Sexual addiction, gateway. What's more addictive than sex pertaining to the very same thing? What's the next level, I would say?
I mean, before we get to the next level, because you said a gateway, and it can be a gateway.
Yeah,
I wanted to pick up on more.
Stay in that same realm, nothing to do with anything else. I'm talking about, between two people. I mean, so let's say sex as an addiction, or sex as in that something that is just like it's so, it's so you can't help but want it. What's the next level to that, would you say?
Well, if we're talking about, if you define sex as, let's say, what people consider conventional sex, and I don't want to go into the definition, then the only thing that can top that is more extreme versions of sex, in my opinion.
You think so?
I would like to hear.
But you don't quite see where I'm heading.
Okay, you're gonna have to give me a point where.
I'll go further. So, in my mind right now, if you're talking sexual addiction, the only thing stronger than that would be love.
Okay, I can see why you've said that. I need you to break that down a bit, because are we talking about an addiction to the feeling of love from others, or the addiction, not necessarily of being loved by others, but being valued by others, by being seen as?
I'm saying sexual addiction, being being topped by something greater than sexual addiction would be being in love with somebody.
So how do you? Okay, yeah, I can see what you're saying.
Love for somebody. Now, this could just be my theory, so take it with a pinch of salt. But in my head, the only thing that would top sexual addiction, I would say, is loving somebody.
Oh, okay.
Like being in love, they say.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But then when you spoke of it that way, you spoke of it as an addiction, and in some, you might be right actually that it can be addictive. But then, if love becomes addictive, or you see it as addictive, then you have to question whether what you're feeling or chasing is truly love in the purest sense.
Well, let's think about this, right? Let's think about this, and it brings into so many things. And again, as I said, we're using the Frankenstein monster and the doctor as the muse for this discussion. When you think about love, right, and you think about how much somebody would do to maintain that love for somebody else, could that be argued? Could that be argued? There's a lot of similarities to Frankenstein as well as the monster.
Yes, because they're trying to win someone's love, or I use the word approval or value of someone else. Yeah. Sometimes they can be different, but then can we say we're addicted to love if we have this codependent situation of needing someone or trying to get someone to love us, to desire us? Because that speaks to me as you're intrinsically you're betraying the very things that show you don't love yourself.
Yes, it might be, but at the same time, we're staying in the realm of love, right? Now, remember what I said. These lines can be easily blurred. Sometimes you think you're loving yourself by loving this person even more, and being so much more in tune with what they want by sacrificing yourself. You think about Romeo and Juliet; it's the same thing, right? You know, you're willing to sacrifice even death for somebody else so they can live. This might be a troll, but let me just see. Somebody wants to. Oh no, it's nothing. So yeah, so in this sense, yes, you have a Romeo and Juliet type of situation where you have, over the years, people sacrificing things. You've heard about the story with the was it the Queen or the from Troy? I can't remember her name. The beautiful one that they said it can launch a 1,000 ships. So beautiful, she can launch 1,000 ships. And when Greece went to war, I think it was Helen. Helen, her name.
I don't know. Troy.
Yeah. Now, again, we have a love story where this man literally sacrificed everything, including his family, in the end, for the love of one woman.
Yes, it is love, and it is an addiction. But I'm still going to go towards the point that actually, when you dig a bit deeper into it, it's not really an addiction to love. It's basically an addiction to.
No. I'm not necessarily saying it's an. I'm not necessarily saying it's. I think I'm saying two things. So what I'm saying is, right. But at the same time, it is an addiction.
Yes, it can be an addiction. I agree with you.
And again, like I said, it's pretty much how you see it, and it's very nuanced what we're talking about. So you have love, right? I'm just using Helen of Troy at this point. You have love, and to save your kingdom, all you have to do is let this woman go. Instead, what you do, you sacrifice your brother, your family, your kingdom, because that's essentially what happened in the end. Everything was destroyed, right? So many dead on both sides, but everybody dead on one side. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't really think straight, could you?
No.
As they say, love is one of those things where it's borderline insanity.
Yes.
So that in essence, there is no logic to it. All you know is what will maintain or what will maintain this relationship or maintain this feeling, this love that you have, etc. And so
Yeah.
I'm speaking towards that when I speak about the addiction because what it is the feeling that you
Mm.
don't maybe it's not necessarily the person, but the person is the muse or the feeling to maintain the feeling. And you can't let that go. So in the end, you risk destruction of not only yourself but everybody else around you.
Mm.
When in fact you probably could replicate this feeling with somebody else anyway.
Yeah. So you can call that love, and you can say that is the most powerful form of most powerful form of addiction. So I feel you there. I think the reason I feel like we're missing a trick here because I agree with you. Yeah, love. You can call it love. That intrinsically there's something completely unwholesome about it because then you need to break down what is love.
Good question. But as we know, it's so nuanced. I suppose maybe you could speak to the commonality across the board, but not necessarily specifics because it is somewhat different in certain facets to everybody else.
Mm. So, what makes the love for a woman greater than the love you have for your kingdom and your family and those under your protection? They're both love, but they're actually two different types of love. Um, one type of love, or the way in which it's portrayed, is quite egocentric,
Mhm.
and the other one is quite universal, relatively speaking.
Okay.
Egocentric in a sense that you've sacrificed all these people and family and associates for this romantic partner, and the other in the sense that you might love this person, this woman,
Yeah.
but you're able to meet that love with with a when I say universal love, I mean like a love more like what they used to call it, like agape. Um,
Yeah.
and but not only that, you're mature enough to actually understand and oversee, um, meet that both types of love with a kind of not critical thinking. It's above and beyond that. It's with real values or foundation. You know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um,
So let me ask you a question. With what you just described there, right, in terms of love, couldn't you argue that's somewhat similar to what a crack cocaine addict goes through?
yes, I would say yeah. But I don't know if I can call it because the thing is, what we then need to
I'm
do
not
is
saying it's the same. I'm not saying it's the same. But what I'm saying to you is the need, the drive to maintain it, to have it again,
mm,
or to keep it is
yeah.
is so strong that you're going to do whatever you need to do to um to have it.
You've raised another interesting question, which is how do you know what? How do most people know then what the difference is between love and codependency?
Mm. Well, I suppose the real question is it does it destroy or does it build you? Does it make you better? I suppose it's the same thing as religion, in my opinion.
Mm.
Does it make you a better person? Does it make you a better version of yourself? Does it make your environment better? A better
Is it?
version of itself?
Yeah.
Or does it do the opposite? I would say that is the pivotal question.
Do you believe that it's not? Sometimes it's not a matter of whether something is objectively beneficial or detrimental Do you believe that? Oh,
Pardon me. That was somebody calling me. Um, but yes, carry on.
oh. So, is it that not necessarily something's objectively positive or negative outright, but at a particular point in time, something can be positive, and then at another point in time, it can be negative? I'll give you an example. I'm gonna use the religion thing as an example, yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm someone in need, I've got I'm going through some emotional turmoil, I'm made homeless or something, and then I feel hopelessness without purpose, and suddenly I'm picked up by a religious group who feeds me, they teach me the values of their religion, and it gives me discipline, and it gives me a sense of purpose again. In that moment in time, that's positive.
Yes.
However, further down the line, if I get to the point where I can stand on my own 2 feet and I appreciate the values that religion has taught me, but then at the same time, now I see things I don't agree with that are making me not live to my full potential, or make me a more judgmental person towards others, or even start to hold me back in sense of my own plans that I see are important to me now that I have this power to help others. Does that religion at that point in time then becomes detrimental to me? Because on the one hand, at one point it helped me grow into myself, and now it's actually trying to keep me in a box.
Okay. Okay. So that's where you are with it.
Yeah.
I mean, truth be told, I think those are like I think what you're describing are like somewhat stepping stones.
Yes, they're part of my journey, but they're not the destination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're indicators of something potentially more destructive. They're like symptoms of a cold, something that's, is yearning to grow and control you, and the control might not necessarily be in a way that you find to your liking.
Yeah.
Again, that could be argued is the same. It feels like it sounds to me like I'm speaking about love. Do you get what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
I see it as the same thing. The symptoms. Do it yourself, despite it might destroy you.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, love.
And this is the thing as well. When you think about certain people, they request certain things of you, knowing that this might be to your detriment, meaning your death or your destruction. Now, how do you continue to love somebody like that? But as we know, there's so many people in this world that continue to love people like that. I would even add this as well, even to the point where, like, even when they're officially detached, meaning separated, the guilt or the viewpoint of the person that they separate from is so strong that they probably feel obliged to still further their destruction. Well, if that means that person may somewhat be better off.
Well, this is why I said learning the difference between love and codependency, or when love becomes codependency, the thing that's destructive, the thing that keeps you clinging to something or...
But wait, hold up. That's the thing, though. Isn't a facet of love codependency technically?
I think I have to break down what I think codependency is, just so we can when I say codependency, I'm talking about an idea of someone. It's absolutely vital to have someone in your life or someone's approval or agreement. It's not like it's desirable, it's more like it's necessary. Whereas I've always seen, if you say you need, it's like saying the difference between you need someone and saying you desire someone or want someone. There's a big difference. When
you're missing the point where we're talking about a situation where it's beyond that. That's why it's so extreme. That's why we're speaking about it, because it's beyond that. You don't see it as something you want. You see it as something you need.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a difference between something you need and something you want or desire. To say you need something or someone, that kind of love where you're willing to just sacrifice everything, the various stories you've illustrated. That, and I talk about codependency, that's when you need something. And when you need something, what you're essentially saying is you can't live without it. Like you said, addiction.
Bingo.
Yeah.
But as much as you say that, like, I'm sure you know somebody that actually carry themselves like that pertaining to their partner. Do you get what I mean? Maybe everyone has at some point, to some extent, has carried themselves like that at some point, and including myself. And I do know people that still carry themselves like that with a partner, or not even a partner, something, an object, a thing that they're into. So, I mean, you really haven't, you pretty much just ran on the spot, because you haven't really gone anywhere with it, because I'm still in the same place. You haven't really differentiated, because I think codependency still fits into that box of part of love and what comes with it.
Well, all I've said in response to you saying it's love, all I've said is that, is it love or codependency? Now, you could argue that codependency is a form of love, and maybe not a healthy form of love in the sense of,
by no means is it healthy, but like I said to you, to be in love is to be crazy. So, being crazy is not healthy. Like, you've heard about, this is where, you have this situation where people are biting themselves and all kind of nonsense just to prove their love. You have people do some crazy things for love. Let's be real now. We already spoke about Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah. So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with your point of view. I was just saying that there's more than one way to look at it. Like, I've used the word codependency, you used the word love. We both said when you need something, like you can't live without it. They're all fair points and they're true to the point. Or we've even talked about addiction, and addiction is, for me, it does have similar traits to loving something. But do you really love that thing in some extent if you need it to live? Doesn't that thing also become a curse? Because, at some point...
It starts to be like you're kind of struggling with the levels of it, but you're pretty much just heading towards levels where it's beyond your imagination, unless you're experiencing it. Because to me, in my opinion, that's why I think it's the most addictive thing, even stronger than drugs, even stronger than just simply having sex. I think love is stronger than everything, and it's a very generic thing to hear this phrase where, love is the strongest force in the world.
Well, when people usually talk about love being the strongest force in the world, they usually talk about the positive aspects of it. But we're talking about the very negative.
It doesn't negate what we know the negatives of love to be.
Well, that's what I was saying. We're talking about the negative aspects or the shadow side of this idea of the concept of love. I still think there's some semantics here, because I don't think I've said anything that significantly deviates on what you're saying. You're saying it is love. I'm saying, well, I think there's a bit of room for interpretation of what love is, in terms of aligning love with, let's say, some codependent behavior. I'm not 100% convinced.
That's what gets me. What you said. You said codependency. You said codependency, and so I'm thinking about that, because I'm like, it's to me it's still under the same branch pertaining to love and the addiction that it is stronger than drugs, and sex.
A reason I'm not 100% sold is because I believe that anything of that ilk, in terms of your interpretation of love, I don't think it really is love. If the person's really that self-aware of themselves, they realize that they have to distinguish whether it's love or not. I'm not 100% sold. I think there's a lot of overlap between them, but I don't think they're 100%. I don't think they're not completely synonymous with each other. I think there's some overlap here, and I think that if you broke it down between, and I can only speak from my personal experience about some form of codependency of someone I was in love with, I've then got to recognize that in part I can say yes, I love the person, but then I can say that same feeling, how much of that was a love for the person, or was it really there was something within myself that I was chasing to this perceptual feeling of being loved? And I don't think I can call that love anymore. I don't think I can.
Should I tell you where you are?
Go on.
You sound like somebody that's been cured, man. That's literally what you sound like.
Yeah, and so maybe. Yeah.
You sound like somebody that's come out the other end,
yes.
And you understand. You can see. You have hindsight vision of what your situation was and what you went through, and you know that. No, that was a matter of codependency. Like she didn't have her claws with me so deep that I couldn't even breathe. Now you just sound like somebody that's seen the light. But we're not talking about that far into it. We're talking about.
So okay, if we're talking about somebody who has,
I think we all have at some point, and that's pretty much what I'm speaking about. I'm talking about the point where things have grown to be so, to the magnitude where things are so in depth and is so poignant and powerful, to the point where you're absolutely crazy being in love, and unconditional is a second, that's a secondary thing at this point. All you know is you would do anything, or at least you feel like you do, because you feel like you do anything to keep this feeling that I love this person. Why it's so powerful.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to give you a bit more insight into why I gave you that answer. I don't mind sharing this. Basically, I at one point where I was doing counselling for about 6 months. It was after a relationship.
Okay.
And through that process, it helped me realize that relationship there was some form of codependency. And so I had to try and pick out the love bits and the actual dependent bit, the sort of codependency bits around what was that? What was the what's the root of that? And it basically, in the same way we talk about the idea of doing anything for someone's love, and that in the same way I was doing anything to maintain this relationship with this said person. You could rephrase it as you're a yes person for one person or particular.
No. Like I said to you, there is no wrong or right, and to what you're saying, I understand. But again, I'm not saying you're wrong when you talk about codependency. But and even then, you could argue that could possibly be both ways, And even if someone has control of their faculties, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't have a codependency situation going on. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm merely speaking on the situation as it is, or at least as the person that is at where they would do anything for love, to the point where it becomes an addiction, because as we know, when you're talking about addiction, one could argue it's you're talking something negative now, because you don't have control.
I'm going to throw something else out there then. So there's a difference between the person who doesn't realize that their love for someone or something, and they'll do anything, becomes unhealthy. But then there's someone who actually acknowledges it but still chooses to participate in it and accept it, simply because they they've accepted in themselves that this is the best they're going to get. No one's going to love them any better, or this idea of love, or the love they have in this situation, is sort of the best they're going to get. Or a fear of detachment, of losing that love.
So it sounds to me that you're speaking about codependency again. Truth be told,
I'm not speaking about codependency.
What I've said is where go on. Sorry, speak it.
So if you're in a situation where you acknowledge that you have that kind of love for someone, where you'll do anything for them, but then you acknowledge it, but then you suddenly realize you're going to keep on doing it, even though you see that you've sacrificed a lot and you've given up a lot of things for this person, because you're scared of not having that feeling of love from this person. But you said codependency, so what it brings to mind is how closely those two things are aligned. I've not mentioned the word codependency in that description, but I can see why you said codependency. Because at that point,
let me just add this, because I think maybe you're not saying this part of it, but going back to the Frankenstein monster that we spoke about, I guess what I'm speaking on is the fact that Frankenstein, or just growing up in the environment that we spoke about, and it's the same thing with being in love, right? Or the monsters that we're talking about, being a killer, being a murderer, or anything like that. You tell yourself you tell yourself a lie long enough, you live to experience it becomes the truth.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're wrong about it actually being codependency, because it technically is, but to that person in that situation, they don't know that. They don't necessarily acknowledge that. They don't want to. They might know it, but they don't want to, because that feeling is so strong and they don't want to lose it.
Yeah.
Hence the reason why I use the idea, I describe it as an addiction. Being in love to that extent is an addiction, almost borderline obsession. And you can't control it, because you can't control your morals. Everything is out the window. All you know is the need to maintain. And if you think about, we're going back to, the lowercase stuff, like say sexual experiences, or what's the other one? Drugs. Right? It's pretty much the same thing. You live a life where you're just trying to do for this thing. You just want to experience this feeling.
Yeah, and
it's addiction.
No matter what,
high again. You want to keep it high. And I'll add this part to it as well. Could you argue that love is probably one of the only highs that you can maintain for prolonged periods? Because every other high, right? It lasts for what? Maybe an hour, maybe a day. You're lucky, and that's really the potent ones. But you can be in love for you can be in love all your life.
Or no matter what people say, you can convince yourself that your love lasts a lifetime.
Yes.
You can convince yourself, that love does that. You'll always feel that way. The other person feel that it's just there. That it's you can do that. I'm not saying that's true, but certainly you can tell yourself. You know, you can justify it to yourself that that's the case, even if that's not the case. You will find a way to justify it. You know.
There you go. So I guess what I'm saying, that's why I said it's under the same umbrella when you talk about addiction, because if you think about somebody that's in love, they'll find a way to convince themselves that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? This is the right road to travel to maintain it, because I just want to keep this feeling. I just want to keep this love, right? So whether I need to kill somebody, whether I need to dig a grave, whether I need to, you know what I mean, whether I need to jump in front of a bullet, and we know that's a thing. I'm going to do this because I love this person. And you know, it brings into the idea of the culture as well that you create for yourself. You do something long enough, it becomes a culture. You know, it goes from a habit to a culture. Do you understand what I mean? So
yes. I can relate to this, man. I can relate to this. I hadn't finished talking about this counseling experience, but what I'm going to say is the culture that drove me to pursue that love in that particular situation, to justify it, was actually based on religion.
So it was religion. Okay, so you're saying it was
it was a big factor. It was a massive factor.
Yeah, it was a culmination of two probing environmental factors, so religion as well as the feeling.
Yes. The religion actually reinforced the feeling of love, because obviously if you're in religion or the church and this is what a man of God's supposed to be like, with Bible passages and whatnot, that is a very powerful reinforcer.
Yes. So that adds to the culture, you're saying?
Yeah, and it is a culture in itself.
And now you're going to church and you're praying. You're praying for your love, like you're praying to have faith, to believe in your in your love even more. You know, again, I keep mentioning Romeo and Juliet because you know that was, I'm sure that was somewhat enriched by the religious experience. Shakespeare loved church too. Come on now, let's keep it real.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? So it's just it's a very interesting topic when you really break it down. Now we're not trying to say, you know, love is, you know, when love is right, it's right. But at the same time, it's a double-headed sword. There's also situations where love can actually be to your detriment. It can actually kill you, and this is the other side that we're kind of exploring. When love is so cancerous for one person, and it's so lopsided where one person loves the other one so much more that one person is blinded by the imbalance and the other person is somewhat not crazy, but they can see.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Well, you know, not in a technical term of being in love.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking of another story, Othello.
Go on, speak on it.
The story about the general who ended up, basically, a colleague conspired against him out of jealousy and convinced him that his wife was being unfaithful.
Ishmael said benefits from the other. Yes, that's right. There's no benefit, but you still do it. And you know, we spoke about simps the other day, so that would add to it. But Karen, sorry.
And Othello,
he said,
basically ended up killing his wife.
Hold on. I think we have a guest. Let's hear what our friend FD has to say.
All right, how you doing, FD?
How you doing, FD? You want to say something about the topic?
What?
You want to say something about the topic? Wait, I think his connection is a little bit off. But I'll give him time. Go and speak.
So a fellow ended up killing his wife because out of jealousy, as if he's made to believe she was giving her love away to another.
Yeah.
And he thought he loved her so much that he felt betrayed, and his thinking was, I love you so much, if I can't love you, no one's gonna love you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, that's but that's a facet of love we've grown to know as well. But it's still in the same box where like it's grown to this extent so malignant that it's destructive. You feel in having the ability to let go. You know, it kind of brings this phrase to mind that says, you know, the operation was a success, but the patient died.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a very interesting thing to experience. And so now now we go further in now where you're on the other side of it and things are somewhat different, where you actually understand that, man, I was really out of my mind.
yeah.
You know, you're bonkers, you're borderline crazy. Some of this stuff, you know, if one is blindly in love. Yeah. So yeah, I think Ishmael gets where we're coming from with this. So it's a madness, you know?
For sure.
And so, you know, we could just kind of veer back to what we were talking about to begin with. The question was, are monsters born or are they made? And of course, the obvious answer is made. But at the same time, it just begs the question, along the way, along the journey, you have so many factors along the way, thinking about when you talk about addiction and the different types of addiction, and perhaps even the different types of addiction together at one time being played. You know, we heard about the drugs involved so many times, and people don't see sex as a drugs in itself. On top of that, you have love, and on top of that, you have jealousy, different facets. You know, that's just like a dark shade of love, in a sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Those things along the journey just kind of amplify, I hope you manage it, or you know, and unfortunately a lot of the time, case in point with a lot of the examples we've talked about today, those things along the way have made it worse. They've just amplified there that just began to sort of stem. Yeah, sure. On the other hand, though, you can get to a point where you're not actually looking at digging deep in the matter. You're just using something to manage whatever's going on there, that thing that will create a monster. And I'm not talking about drugs. I'm just talking about habits we form to deal with things that don't actually resolve the issue. They're just like almost like painkillers.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, I would say a lot of people in today's world are, and maybe I can throw myself in there. I can be, you know, maybe a lot of us are high functioning monsters. where we're able to function in society, but underneath that veneer, there's, you know.
Absolutely, man. Come on now. You know that's real. But to your point, I would agree, and the way I maybe to put it in my own way is, at the end of the day, we're all caught up in something. We're all trying to get over something, but in the end, we end up taking painkillers for a broken leg, or taking pain for cancer. You get what I mean?
Well, like antidepressants
Or
for
antidepressants, yeah.
yeah.
For diabetes. You know, it's just like when you put it like that, it's just like I suppose the most simple in layman terms is we misdiagnose ourselves, become our own doctors in a crazy and deranged way, and now we misdiagnose ourselves, and it's to our detriment.
Yeah.
Again, we're our state is crazy and deranged. So how can we in any way figure this out? We can barely tell the time of day. Do you get what I mean? Much less to unwrap something so complex. But this is what we're doing, and so it just brings to mind, man. It's a crazy world, and society is the mad ship going over the river, or heading towards the Titanic headed towards the iceberg. Very interesting. But yeah, I think that's a wrap for tonight. Do you have any last words you want to say before we wrap things up?
I think the only thing I want to say is that we're all in this together, whatever struggle we may have in our own personal lives. Where we can all be monsters, but we can also all be human, and we kind of sometimes oscillate between the two. And I say that to encourage us all to acknowledge that, and and progress with our own journeys in terms of not just feeding the beast, but controlling it, and using that energy that the beast has for the purposes of our own human growth and evolution. And we're invited to that, and we have that potential.
Absolutely. On other notes, I just want to say this was my last poetry book I published. It's called Poetry Journal Growing Pains by Alex Murdoch. That is my name. I'm also known as the Mad Poet. Hence why I come up with, hence why topics like these are so appropriate for me. And I'm working on something new. I'm looking to have a book launch, and it most likely looking to be on the 10th of August. But the book will be published on the 27th of July. I have more things out there, so of course, everyone, if you're looking to get a sample of what I write, whether it's stories or poetry, you can find it on Amazon, or you can find options on my sites, which is www.dien.uk, where you can order directly from me, and I always sign copies are signed before I post them. So yes, like I said, I have stories, I have poetry, so anybody looking to read what I have out there, or you can message me directly. But yes, I thank everyone for tuning in. It's been a great night, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Philosopher's poet on the other side of the mic. Thanks for tuning in. And it's been great having you on. Somebody to kind of chime in and follow me with these conversations, and it's been fun. But yes, indeed, it's time to go, and I thank everyone for sharing their thoughts. Thanks for Ishmael, chiming in, and FD, and everyone from the live.
We're back on Tuesday.
Back on Tuesday for another live with another topic, just to top things up as we do. Okay, thanks everyone.
All right.
Thanks.
Correct.
Take care. Take care.
Mind over matter, overcompensating, overstatements, crookedness relating, a soul's churn in return, mental overstimulation, one word, riveting, it tells my pilot. Streams that are promised to make seeking less.